What is up? So I've been getting a lot of questions lately about training splits and just kind of organizing your training, kind of like best ways to do it. So one of the questions I've been asked a lot is, should we be considering our exercise selection in terms of muscle groups or more about movement patterns? Um, so I'm hoping to kind of knock this one out of the park and provide some clarity here. And then if I don't really answer something you were hoping would be answered in terms of training splits, feel free to ask that in the comments or reach out to me on Instagram because I could do another video or maybe just answer you directly. So getting into movement patterns versus muscle groups. To provide some clarity for people who might be not really sure what we're talking about here, basically what we're looking at is just two ways to categorize our exercise selection. So movement patterns are going to be things like organizing by like a squat pattern or a hinging pattern or a pushing pattern, pulling pattern. So think like squat, deadlift is going to be like a knee dominant versus a hip dominant exercise. A bench press versus like a chin up is going to be a pressing versus a pulling exercise. And the list kind of goes on. Versus muscle groups where it's going to be what people I think traditionally associate with going to the gym and working out. It's going to be doing a quad exercise versus a glute exercise, a hamstring exercise versus a bicep exercise, tricep versus chest, and so on and so forth. So let me preface everything with saying that there is no right or wrong way to categorize your exercises. It's really a matter of like what is going to benefit you and the training goal that you're after the most. So my objective here is to kind of lay out some goals and some proficiency levels that will hopefully give you some insight onto what might benefit you from the perspective of categorizing your own training. So let's start out with this spectrum of complete novice, like never trained before in their entire lives, and absolute veteran who's been training for years and years and years. If I have someone on this spectrum, on this side of the spectrum, where they're a complete beginner, they're very new to exercise, my strategy, if I'm training them and I'm taking them through a program, my initial strategy is probably going to be heavily on the side of movement patterns. The reason being is that my initial goal for them in the beginning of their training program, regardless of their goal, because their goal might be aesthetic, their goal might be strength oriented, their goal might be athletic oriented, but we need to reach a certain point that we can even begin to be chasing goals like that. So there needs to be a certain level of like, okay, we got to learn how to do these basic things before you can even consider these more complex goals. So like an analogy for that would be, if you're learning how to play an instrument, then you need to learn just kind of like basic techniques and basic music before you can start rocking out and getting in all these intense songs and whatever. So if I have someone in that very beginner stage, I'm probably going to focus on movement patterns because I want to teach them how to move through these patterns effectively. And those patterns are probably going to have more carryover, right? I don't really need this person thinking about like, okay, this one is hitting your glutes and this one's hitting your quads and this one's hitting this and this one's hitting that. It's like, no, here's how to squat and let's get really good at this, all right? Here's how to deadlift. Let's get really good at this. Here's how you bench. We're going to get really good at this, all right? Working on each individual movement pattern. Now, if I have someone whose goals are very athletic oriented, I might think in terms of movement patterns as well. So if I have athletes whose maybe their goal is to increase their vertical, right? I'm not really going to worry so much about like, okay, this in particular muscle, this muscle is doing this action and this muscle and this and this and this. Because it's like, not that it's not useful. It's just a matter of like when I'm organizing their training, I'm not thinking about which muscle is doing which thing. I'm thinking about the overall activity of jumping in the air, all right, and how I can optimize that activity. I'm focusing on the muscle actions themselves. How is the muscle behaving? How are the tissues behaving? How is the whole system behaving? And that's going to lend itself, it's going to be a little bit more in the realm of developing through movement patterns. Now, shifting gears a little bit, let's say that you're someone who is, has got some training experience under their belt, and the only thing you care about is looking good naked. It's like, hell yeah, do your thing. That's going to be a little bit more on the side of muscles, all right? Because at the end of the day, it's like, yes, you can organize based on, we're going to do this movement pattern and that movement pattern, whatever, but it's like, if your goal is aesthetic, then there's going to be a little bit more nuance to each way that you train each muscle. So it's like you want to provide an effective stimulus to all these different muscles from the perspective of like you're looking at it and you're looking at things like symmetry and you're looking at like the specific rates of growth within these specific muscles. All right. So it's just a way of kind of dialing it in and saying, okay, well, if we care about the way that each muscle is appearing, then we should be very targeted in saying like, I don't need a pressing exercise that I can make sure is hitting this, this, and this, and I don't need to worry about making sure that all of my quad exercises also hit my glutes and hamstrings, calves, and it's like, no, it's like, if I want to grow my quads, I just gotta fucking fry my quads, right? So in that specific context, it's like, yeah, it'll probably be more beneficial to focus on specific muscle groups. Now, again, there's a lot of crossover between these things, especially as you go down the spectrum of like experience level and so on. So I know for example, like I've worked with athletes in the past where I organize their training typically in movement patterns, right? But they might come to me and they might say like, okay, like coach, my coach told me that I need to put on some weight. Maybe you have a football player, he's got to put on some weight. Maybe the athlete themselves is just like, hey, like I want to train, I want to get stronger, I want to get my vertical up, but it'd be really nice if in the process I get a little bit bigger, feel like it'll help me in my sport, whatever it might be. Something I might do is kind of like a gap analysis. So I might say, okay, we're going to go through, we're going to organize things by movement patterns. And then we're going to kind of look at maybe what is missing. Like when I look at a bodybuilding routine, like a proficient bodybuilder's routine, and I'm seeing at all the bases that they're covering because they need to make sure that all of these muscles are growing, I might do like a little bit of a gap analysis and say, okay, well, my athlete's doing these movement patterns. What are things that maybe are not getting as much attention as they could be? And maybe I could provide some stimulus in those specific areas. So it's like they might be doing plenty of pulling work, yeah, but it's like, could I not focus on biceps on top of that that original pulling work? It's like, absolutely I can. So it's like that's a situation where you might even find yourself doing some crossover between the two. The point is that you have two different lines of categorical thinking, and neither is right or wrong. It's really about beyond which you kind of choose to subscribe to. It's about kind of how you implement them and making sure that the stimulus that you're providing is very specific to the goal that you're setting out to achieve. I hope this was helpful for those of you who are trying to figure out, maybe depending on your goal, which type of split or how you want to organize things. If you didn't find this helpful, shoot me a DM on Instagram or reach out to me in the comments and just throw some questions at me, or maybe ask for some clarification, or maybe some ideas that you'd like to see for future videos. Other than that, thank you, and peace out.